Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors as we move back to a daily posting schedule as of today. And what better way to kick off the daily stretch of the podcast between now and the end of free agency next summer? Yeah, baby, that's how long we're with you daily. We are going to talk about Media Day. I was down there at Media Day today, checking out the sites, seeing people again for the first time in 18 months. It was a beautiful time. And I'm joined as well by someone else who I saw for the first time in a very, very long time today. It is Vivek Jacob. He's going to pop on. We're going to talk about our biggest takeaways from Media Day for the Toronto Raptors. Vivek will also be on later on in the week as well for a second special episode, which is very, very fun. But without further ado, let's get to it. Media Day talk with myself and Big V on today's episode of Locked On Raptors. Enjoy.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to episode number 1023 of Locked On Raptors for Monday, September the 27th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the podcast on all your favorite podcast providers and on Twitter at Locked On Raptors, where you get links to every single episode. We are free on all your favorite platforms as well. And I want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Got you a little bit later than we usually would, but that's because we were fact-finding for today's podcast all day long and had to bring it to you a little bit later on because Media Day is quite an excursion between driving there and driving back and all that other stuff and seeing all the pressers. So apologies for the late posting time today. Maybe too much apology for posting it late, whatever. As promised, off the top of the show and on our tease on Friday, we are talking about Media Day today as the Toronto Raptors met with the media and big faces and names answered questions, and it was a lovely time. Mostly I was there for the free water and for the seeing of people for the first time in 18 months, which was a lovely, lovely time. It felt like the first day of school, except it's like the first day of school if you started grade 9, but you hadn't bought new clothes since grade 6. That's kind of how I felt today with all my pandemic gear coming on in. I'm surprised I didn't show up in sweats. Either way, on today's show, here to talk about Media Day and all of its glory and our biggest takeaways from the day that was is our pal Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com, who was there out and about on crutches with his Achilles injury, which we've been updating with bated breath every single week you appear on the show. The crutches are in behind you. It's beautiful accoutrement to the shot. Vivek, how's it going, buddy?
Not bad. It was nice to have some sense of normalcy back in my life and being at the arena and seeing you and Katie and all the other wonderful people that cover the Raptors, and then seeing the Raptors themselves. So yeah, it was nice to just be out of my apartment.
It was really nice to have an alarm set in the morning to wake up for. That's a thing I haven't really had in a long time. I usually just kind of like wake up when I roll out of bed. It was nice like being up before my fiance, which never happens as well, as she is a teacher who goes to school every single day like a real adult, whereas I sit at home and talk about basketball. I got to go do that in a sort of more professional setting today. It was quite nice. So we're going to dig into our big top takeaways from Media Day today. The first thing we should start with, I think, before we get into sort of, player and coach and GM related stuff, is the news that came down that the Raptors are a single second dose away from being 100% vaccinated, which is, I think, a relief to hear. It was something I was not necessarily expecting to hear after that Rolling Stone piece over the weekend talking about the sort of growing tide of anti-vax sentiment among players. We've seen many players today around the league kind of show their asses when talking about the vaccine stuff. Bradley Beal among them. Andrew Wiggins continues to dig his heels in for some reason. And it's, something I did not want to have to deal with on the Raptors beat. And thankfully we don't have to, because the Raptors are 1 second dose away. How much of a sigh of relief was this to you to hear, Vivek? And are you just kind of eager to put all of that sort of speculation as to what the Raptors' vaccine status might be behind you as we go into the season?
Yeah, I'm happy it's behind us before we could even get started, because I think for a little bit on Twitter yesterday as well, people were speculating on who among the Raptors might be unvaccinated. And
great thing to speculate on Twitter about, by the way, for sure. Yeah. A good use of time.
I wasn't even sure how that got started, but glad to know that they expect to be at 100% vaccinated by opening night. and they won't have to worry about who can travel, who can't, all that kind of stuff, and they can just focus on basketball, because let's face it, they had a lot of time not focused on basketball last season.
Yeah, and seeing as at least 4 of their games of the season will be in New York, between Brooklyn and the Knicks, and then of course LA, San Francisco, that's another handful of games as well. I guess like 7 total games that would have taken place in cities where you can't play if you're not vaccinated. Just a nice thing.
Well, Knicks and Nets would be 8, right? 4 each.
Yeah, but then 2 of them would be at home.
All right,
doing the road game math. Either way, a tenth of the schedule would have been in cities where you can't play if you're not vaccinated. So thankfully, that's not something we'll have to reckon with on the Raptors end of things. Let's maybe start with Bobby Webster, Vivek. He spoke. Bobby is a very good sort of guy who seems like he says a lot, but doesn't actually really in terms of like depth. It's kind of a a masterful art that a lot of really good GMs have kind of come to hone. I remember Alex Anthopoulos was a lot like this with the Blue Jays, where he'd have all these pressers and it was like, this is amazing, the best thing a GM has ever said. And you look at the transcript and it's like, oh, they did not say anything at all. But any key takeaways from Bobby Webster, who began the day with about 20 minutes answering questions off the top at 10 a.m. this morning?
Yeah, nothing significant. I think the biggest thing he revealed was the fact that the Raptors expect to be fully vaccinated. Beyond that, just looking at the team and just talking about how the team was obviously set back being in Tampa last year, and they're looking forward to having the comforts of home and just having a normal season again. I think that was probably the other thing, in terms of the normalcy. But I don't expect Bobby to reveal too much at press conferences.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing is no Masai speaking today. Perhaps, taking advantage of that bump up in status within the team and not having
he said it, right?
The piddly little media day stuff. Yeah. I didn't attend the last one with Masai. What was his exact quote that day?
Well, right at the end when they were asking for any final questions, he was like, well, all right, that's it. You're not going to see me the rest of the year.
What a king. What a king.
Yeah.
To that point you were making about Bobby talking about being happy about in Toronto, but being back in Toronto. I think, that was an obvious line of questioning that came up today, and not terribly surprising that basically everyone who hit the podium was asked about it. But I still do think it's worth noting that they seem legitimately very relieved to be back and not having to worry about, all the different extra stuff that came on top. And they spoke really gracefully about their time in Tampa and how it wasn't all that bad and how they made it work. And, it was more the losing than anything that kind of got them. But I think, we've seen it with the Blue Jays as well. I think they're 21-9 since returning to Toronto, and just all seem a lot more comfortable. I don't know how you couldn't, if you're the Raptors, not be excited and just glad to be back in a place where you're going to be all season long, and not worrying about, are we going to leave halfway through the season, or is my hotel room going to be clean when I get back? It's just not a thing they're worrying about. And then there was a lot of talk about the excitement for fans and all that stuff. I certainly got a little bit stirred when I think Fred VanVleet was kind of going in on how exciting it's going to be the first day back, and you get those fans sort of just welcoming the team home. All that stuff is, I think, really, really exciting. And, just, I don't know about you, man, but just the general vibe of being there, kind of being immersed in it all, even though it was different than usual and it was kind of spaced out and there wasn't the workstations that you typically see set up, and it was a little bit sequestered. I just thought, man, it's just so freaking nice. It's so nice to be able to see the players in person again and interact with them. You're not sort of these bubbles on a screen. Not that I did a lot of the Zooms last year anyway, but I know you were through that a lot. And it just seems like everybody's just happy that things are inching back towards normal-ish, which, I guess it's not to be, surprised about, but still, it's a very clear sentiment that kind of ran through the entire day. We're going to get into some more tangible, like basketball-y takeaways from Nick Nurse and Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, and on down the list coming up in just a second here. But first, Big V, I got to tell the people about Sleeper, which is a wonderful, wonderful app that is changing the way we play fantasy basketball. And it really, for me, as someone who doesn't like the day-to-day grind of having to pick games every single day and pick my lineup every single day, I like fantasy football for that reason. It's like a once-a-week commitment, and it's lovely. You can do this very much the same with Sleeper, where you're not just at the mercy of what the schedule is and having to pick, your lineups every day. You're not at the mercy of if you have a guy playing 2 games and the other guy that you're playing against has a guy playing 4 games that you're just going to lose because of math. That's not the case anymore because Sleeper has game pick. It's only available on Sleeper, and it lets owners pick a single game per week for each starter to count towards their team's total score, ensuring an even number of games played between opponents. The days of losing because your opponents simply had more scheduled games to play that week are over. The days of mindless busy work are gone too, and the days of giving up halfway through the season because of that busy work also over. That is the Sean guarantee. If you invite me to your fantasy basketball league, I am for sure going to give up halfway through the year because it's too much busy work, but not if you invite me to play on Sleeper. You get to pick 1 game per week for each player based on player matchups, home versus away, opponent defensive ranking, pace of play, and more. It adds up to more strategy and less busy work. So you can beat your friends and say it wasn't just because of luck. That's the fun of fantasy basketball, is being smarter than your friends. And if you're playing on Sleeper, you actually get to prove that you are smarter than your friends, other than, proving that you had guys who played more games that week because of the schedule. Whether you prefer redraft or keeper or dynasty, Game Picks has you covered. Sleeper cracked the fantasy basketball code. And if you play fantasy football and like the weekly strategy of it all versus the daily busy work, then you're going to love Game Picks. Download the Sleeper app and start a league with your friends today. You will not be disappointed. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at DirecTV Stream. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device to let you catch the game live. You've got another that lets you stream your favorite shows and watching sports highlights that's done on your phone or your laptop or wherever else you might be watching your highlights. And you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I'm going to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and confusion. Get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. All right, Vivek, let's dig into some more of these sort of juicier morsels from Media Day today. I guess we can start with Nick Nurse. The thing I was gearing up to ask Nick Nurse, actually, before he kind of answered the question for me was, he's never had a lottery pick to coach before, right? He's only ever coached, late first, second rounders, undrafted guys in terms of young guys in the team developmental projects. And then Scottie Barnes comes along and he's a number 4 pick. There's a lot of cachet tied to it. He's a project and all that, but also he's a very, very big investment for the team. And I was curious if, there might be a bit of an easing in. I was about to ask him, does your approach to a lottery pick change at all? Or is it about the same as it is when you're moving along, younger guys of a lesser pedigree? And he just came out and said in response to another question, he's going to have a huge role for us, and I want to get him as many reps as possible. I don't know if I totally expected to hear that. Vivek, did you have any sort of thoughts on Nurse's seemingly very eager approach to getting Scottie Barnes into games right away?
Well, if there's one thing I've learned from Nick Nurse's comments over the years, it's I'll believe it when I see it. So it was great to hear. Yeah, I will still wait to see it on the court. What he means by huge, and how involved Scottie really ends up being. I would love it to be the case. Obviously, I've even said that, for the time that Pascal Siakam is out, I would love to see him in the starting lineup and getting those reps and accelerating that development. Even if Chris Boucher might be the better option at power forward to start the season. So, yeah, it'd be great to see. I'll believe it when I see it. As far as the reps are concerned, I think, if you want to look at it as a theme, when you look at what Nick Nurse said about him, you look at what Goran Dragic said about Scottie, Pascal. I think it's very encouraging to see how much of an impact he's making already, whether it's his attitude, his approach, or his play. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun this season just watching Scottie grow into whatever role he's given.
Yeah, that was another kind of takeaway, was that despite Scottie himself not talking at all, he will be talking to the media tomorrow at OVO Athletic Center. Despite him not talking at all, he was kind of the talk of the town for the entire day from top to bottom. And, I think based on what we've seen of Scottie Barnes, that doesn't terribly strike me as any sort of surprise. Like he's a lovely, outstanding, outgrowing, like gregarious dude, and that seems to really be kind of being picked up on by the team and everybody involved. And to your point about, you've seen Nick Nurse say things before, and then you're not so sure if he'll ever back it up. I would counter that by saying Nick Nurse has proven that if you're 6'9" and play defense, he will love you like his own son. And so I could totally see Scottie Barnes being a favorite of Nick Nurse right away, because maybe the offense isn't quite there, but we've seen in the past dudes whose offense isn't quite there, who offer a lot on the defensive end, are going to get a lot of runs. Stanley Johnson got a lot of run last year. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson was like the sixth man in 2019-20. Even Patrick McCaw, not much offense, perceived good defense, and that was enough to get him in the lineup all the time. So I think I will maybe sort of side on believing Nick Nurse on this one. And like you said, with Pascal out, and this was another sort of running theme talking about that first month or so, there was no hard timeline given, but it seems like about a month or so was kind of the guess here. It lines up with the timeline we were given in the offseason. That's going to really, I think, force a lot of guys to step up into roles that maybe they're not super comfortable with. And it might be something where you see a lot of growing pains in that first month or so. And you see OG have crooked shooting lines because he's got too high of a burden or whatever it might be. I could totally see Scottie Barnes fitting into that as getting, 25 minutes a game to fill in those power forward minutes. But, maybe it doesn't always go like super swimmingly, but I think that's fine. And if he's getting the reps and the time, I think that should be priority number one. Again, as far as wins and losses and whatnot, I guess this was another thing we can talk about too. I think the team, other than Fred, who, threw around championship a whole lot, but I think we know where he's coming at it from a pretty sort of level-headed, stance anyway. But for the most part, I think everyone kind of took the approach of, this is going to be a bit of a different year for us. We're at a different point of our developmental curve, and it's going to be a learning experience in a lot of ways. I still don't think that means that they're happy to just like concede a bunch of losses and be happy to, rack up another high pick. I think it's going to be a bit of a balancing act between their intense desire to win and the understanding that there's going to be some growing pains. And I'm interested to see how they grapple with that challenge. But in particular, Nick Nurse talked about this, right? He referenced power rankings and over-unders like he's some sort of mad online Raptors freak, whom we love, by the way. Continue to support the podcast. We love mad online Raptors freaks. I am one of them. But, Nick Nurse kind of talking about that stuff. Like, did you get the sense that, did you feel that kind of way too? Just the, maybe there's not the same priority on winning at the highest level this year, but that's still always going to be kind of at odds with the way basically everyone in the core group, from management down to the players, has been kind of wired for the last few years here?
Yeah, I think as you say that, it kind of jogged my memory about what Bobby Webster said when Michael Grange of Sportsnet asked him, where is this team at in terms of chasing that championship? And he kind of talked about those years in 14, 15, 16. And yeah, the goal is to win a championship, but the growth isn't always linear, and they're trying to figure things out. And this seems like a year where they'll be trying to figure some stuff out. At the same time, there is that prove 'em element to the power rankings and the over-under on 36 wins. So I think they'll take that as motivation, and they'll say that last year wasn't a true representation of what they're capable of. And you look at the new pieces that are added to the roster, and they'll believe that they can do a lot better than what the prognosticators have right now.
Yeah, and I think I'm sort of on the more optimistic side wins-wise as well. I think they're going to be deep. I think there's, a lot to like about what their roster has. And one of those guys who I really believe in, obviously he's going to miss the first part of the season, but a guy who I really think can drive winning for this team this year is Pascal Siakam. He spoke, of course, and he was also a big topic of conversation, particularly with Fred VanVleet. And I want to sort of ask you about both of those things. Let's start with Pascal himself. Maybe we'll get to Fred's thoughts on him after the break here. But with Pascal, I think notably, and I don't think I was the only person to notice this or tweet about it, like he just seems like he's in a good place. He seemed pretty happy, chipper. Like he's usually not like the most outgoing with the media, but he seemed very happy to be there today and just kind of seemed like a different kind of dude from last year. What were your thoughts on what Pascal had to say? He spoke a lot about, a whole great number of things, the struggles of last season, the piece in the New York Times about not being the guy last season and all that. What were your impressions of what Pascal had to say today at Media Day?
Yeah, right with you. This was the happiest he's looked in a while, at least interacting with the media. And I think there was a carefree approach to him that endeared us to him in the first place. And that's been missing for a little bit. And I think when I look back on the way he answered questions last year, especially, there was a bit of defensive-ness about the way he would answer. There was a bit of insecurity in, oh, you think that? Oh, that type of thing. And now it's just like, yeah, okay. He's not, sort of looking at the questions through a keyhole and saying, oh, okay, how are they trying to drag me down this time?
Sure.
And I think, he just took the questions at face value and was completely upfront and honest about everything, whether it was his thought process in getting surgery or being the guy, which is a term that he apparently doesn't believe in. And, just focusing on whatever it takes to help this team win. And even, those steps that he's talking about, being honest in terms of getting better as a leader for the young guys. And just saying, it doesn't necessarily come naturally to him to reach out to those young guys and say something as small as, hey, how's it going? Do you need help with anything? That type of thing. And clearly he's making that effort. And so that's all you can ask for. If it doesn't come naturally to him, the fact that he's trying and that he wants to be that type of person, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, totally. I thought it was really nice hearing him speak today. It's like, it's funny. We do this with like Muscle Watch, but this was like Smile Watch. And it was like legitimately like the happiest shape he's been in years or whatever the hell. It was like totally noticeable and palpable. And I thought, he was super honest, I think, in sort of talking about the struggles with the sort of shadow of Kyle last season, right? And I think that was another sort of through line from today. And I don't think anyone's like happy Kyle Lowry is gone by any means. So that's not what I'm saying here. But I do think there is sort of a confirmation that we got today that, yeah, it might have been the right time. And passing the keys over, like Fred, Pascal, OG, they're ready and they're okay with that. And they are ready to kind of do this thing without the big brother kind of looking over things. And I think that was a nice way of sort of, looking at what Pascal said. He sort of talked about how last year he gets the max contract, comes in, and he still wasn't really sure. Kyle's such a big presence, and he wasn't just gonna fade into the background and not be that guy, because that's not what Kyle Lowry is, and he's never gonna sort of back down or anything like that. I think Fred might have actually made that exact quote, but either way, both guys kind of talked about it and how there was that sort of shadow, and now that's not there. They can't kind of hide behind that shadow and not do that leadership stuff either anymore. And so I think it's going to kind of put those guys in a position where maybe they're uncomfortable. I don't think Fred's uncomfortable. We'll get to Fred in a sec. That dude's the most comfortable man in the world. But in terms of the comfort of Pascal, maybe he's not quite ready for that leadership stuff, but he's damn well better, get used to it this season. And I think he's ready for that based on what we heard him say today, which is very nice. We're going to talk about Fred VanVleet on the other side. I could probably talk about Fred VanVleet's availability today for like an hour, because Fred VanVleet rocks, and there was a lot of good stuff in there. I also want to hit on Goran Dragic as well, because he spoke and I think did some good damage control for those who were sort of had preconceived negative notions towards Goran Dragic. We'll get to that in 1 second here. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar, who we've been talking about Built Bar for like over a year now. And I'm telling you, they're amazing. I don't know what else I can tell you about them. They have great flavors. They got a wide variety of flavors, and they have bars that are good for you, and they taste great. Like I said, they got 9 staple flavors in the regular lineup. They got, bonus flavors that pop up for every now and again as well, including cookie dough chunk, which is in my fridge right now, and it is freaking delicious. I had a thought while I was eating the cookie dough chunk, because it tastes just like a candy bar. I thought, you know what they could do? They could definitely bring this to a county fair and deep fry it and sell it, and it would be absolutely delicious. That's how good it is. It reminds me so much of like a Snickers or a Mars bar in terms of taste, that it had me duped into thinking, hey, this would be good deep fried at a carnival. It's really, really good. I don't know what to say. They have 17 to 18 grams of protein in all their bars. Calories range from 130 to 180, much less than your standard candy bar. Only 4 to 5 grams of sugar and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. And you get that good protein in India, so you can get through a workout or whatever else it might be to power you through your day. Amazing flavors, all tasty, all good for you. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Big V. Let's talk about Fred VanVleet, shall we? He had, I think, the longest availability of anybody today, maybe even longer than Nick Nurse, if I'm thinking, or maybe I just was like caught up in Fred more. So I didn't really mark the passage of time as he was talking. I think the key takeaway is the dude's ready to kind of be the front-facing voice of the team if he wasn't already. Like he very much assumes that role without Kyle around. And, I just thought there was a lot of stuff we can get into from what he had to say. What sort of were you left thinking about after Fred spoke today at Media Day, and sort of what do you think were your big takeaways there?
I think my biggest takeaway is that Fred is exactly the type of guy you want leading this young, new era, because when he spoke about being able to be vocal and just be himself right from year one, I think he will recognize how much that did for him, and he will try to offer that same type of support and guidance to, Scottie and all the young guys involved, whether it's Precious, Delano, in the opportunity that he gets, whatever it might be, and I think he's going to push them at the same time too, right? Like all those guys, when they look at Fred, they'll know that this is a guy that didn't walk into a role, right? He wasn't given minutes, anything like that. He had to work his way up, and now he's the leader of the franchise, along with Pascal and OG to a lesser extent. So that's my biggest takeaway. I can't be more excited to have Fred as the leader of the franchise going forward. There's no one better to take over the reins with Kyle gone.
Yeah, the team is in extremely good hands, and he promises to be a better quote than Kyle Lowry ever was. We love Kyle, but man, did he not like talking to the media. It seems like Fred actually enjoys it, although he did say that he does not care about non-basketball people's opinions, which ruffled some feathers within the group of non-basketball people grilling him with questions. But man, he's right. He's like, I trust Bobby, Masai, and Kyle Lowry. Those are where I get my basketball opinions from. And you know what? Fair point. You don't need to be listening to the podcast for your takes, Fred. I thought my sort of favorite thing that he did today, he was asked about Pascal and the guy conversation from the New York Times piece, and he gave like a really thoughtful answer about it. Paused, like was kind of taken aback by the question for a second, started up, paused again, and then dug into it. And they just gave like a really thoughtful answer about the difficult sort of nature of taking on that kind of role and knowing where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing when you are quote unquote the guy, and all the different dynamics that are at play when you're not in the room. You don't understand those dynamics are at play. When you're not on the floor playing at that high level, you don't know those dynamics are at play. I thought that was like, I'm not doing a very good job of sort of detailing the overall answer, but I think, it just was a really thoughtful sort of almost defense of Pascal. And I was really glad to see that. It does seem like everyone's really rooting for Pascal. He talked about Pascal a lot and how excited he was and how sort of last year was out of character in a lot of ways for him. What was your sort of thought reaction to that specific answer when he was asked about Siakam and the whole guy conversation?
Just love the honesty. I think, when you think about the elements that go into being the man, there's the on-court aspect of it. And there's the off-court aspect of it. And I thought, he spoke really well about both. And just, Kyle Lowry, regardless of where he is in his career, as long as he was wearing a Raptor uniform, there's going to be that weight around him. Mm-hmm. That's always going to be difficult to escape. And so dealing with that, and he talked about the flow that he and Pascal had when Kyle was resting, mm-hmm. Or nursing, whatever.
Protecting the bag. Yeah.
Protecting the bag. That's the best way to put it. I think there's just that freedom with which they could play. And, when Kyle was around, they had to sort of be a bit more circumspect in their approach, and mm-hmm. Not necessarily, step on anyone's toes, because they, as Fred made very clear, the relationship part of it is great. Mm-hmm. No one dislikes each other. It's just, a natural feel that comes with and without Kyle Lowry that's hard to escape.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think back to 2018 Media Day, when Masai gave the impassioned plea to Raptors fans to believe in their city, believe in themselves, stop being so inferiority complex about every goddamn thing. I think you could sort of, if you're looking for like the advice to take from this, I think it's probably in that answer that Fred gave about Pascal, where he was talking about, and this wasn't like directed at, Raptors fans or anything like that, but I think there was like a really good kernel of wisdom in there. And it was that, Pascal gets the max, and there's this sort of external expectation put on him to be a quote unquote max player, be quote unquote the guy, or whatever word you want to use for it. And I think that's sort of the lens through which Raptors fans and sort of the general media that really seem to, drastically underrate Pascal after the last year and a half now. Like, I think that sort of seeped in and became just sort of overwhelming for Pascal in a lot of ways, and was sort of the thing that he was judged against. But like, the structure of the team wasn't really set up for him to ever possibly achieve everything that everyone would have hoped for him. And again, it wasn't his best season. He had his down points. He shot poorly from three and all that. But if you look at the sort of grand scheme of things, he was a very excellent player last season in most situations. And that got missed because very good, very excellent, whatever, borderline all-star-ish is not quote unquote max player, which we've talked about it before. The whole max player thing is stupid. There's like 50 max players in the league. Not all max players are made equally. So shut up about it and stop using that as a barometer. But I think that was a really sort of smart way to look at it from Fred's side of things. And sort of, I think, explaining, the difficulty that Pascal would have gone through last season, that Pascal didn't quite get into himself, but, we touched on it a little bit. I thought Fred kind of crystallized that thought a lot better. If you're going to come away with one piece of wisdom, it is stop viewing players as like this one sort of thing that they have to be. Have some nuance to it. Fred used the term nuance like 15 times. That's the other lesson. Just have nuance with the way you look at these things, and you'll probably be less angry about what your basketball team is doing on the floor as a result. Last one I wanted to throw at you, Big V, is Goran Dragic spoke and did some, I think, wonderful Toronto pandering. He talked about Steve Nash quite a bit. I'm sure that was on the list of things passed over from PR. He apologized again for the quote that kind of came out wrong, maybe lost the translation a little bit over the summer, about just sort of it's not the place I want to be or whatever the quote was. Apologized again for that. I don't get any sense that this dude's like itching to be out of here. Obviously, I'm sure if he got traded to the Mavericks or something, he wouldn't be upset. But like, I don't get the sense that this is going to be like a toxic presence in the Raptors locker room that's going to be kind of weighing things down. Dragic seems like a totally fine guy, and I am fully certain that people are going to grow to love him. I officially have moved up my over-under date of when people like Goran Dragic en masse from November 15th to November 8th. I've moved it up a week after today because he just seemed like a likable enough dude, and he doesn't really strike me as someone who's going to, kind of be a cancer in the locker room or anything like that. I don't think that's an unfair term to throw at anybody, but really did not get that sense from Goran Dragic today.
No, and again, it kind of goes back to the nature of the fan base, right? And jumping all over that one quote, which he's now apologized for twice. Yeah. So I don't know what more you need to move on from that. Goran Dragic is the definition of the player that you hate to play against and love to have on your team.
Yep.
Like, he is still good. He is still a productive NBA player. He can still help. And based on his international experience, his NBA experience, there's a lot that he can provide as a vet on this team. And that's something that he talked about over and over again with the young guys.
Yeah.
You know, Pascal, OG, Fred, they've won a championship. They know how to get it done. But those other guys, the type of influence that he could have on someone like a Malachi Flynn, I think that's really positive. And you can already see the way he talks about Scottie Barnes. He loves interacting with him. So I think as long as he's in Toronto, he's going to be fully invested and be fully professional about it. And I think he's going to add, a positive impact on the roster as well.
Yeah, I'm with you totally there. But I also loved, he was asked kind of like about guys in the team that impress him, that he's like, he just like came up with OG pretty quickly. He's like, yeah, OG used to guard me. I know what he can do. It was a pretty good, pretty good way to pander to the OG heads out there, I think, as well. The point he made about, he's in his 14th year or something like that now, and he's actually like excited about kind of imparting wisdom to younger guys. Like, he's going to get plenty of opportunity if we're sort of penciling in what the bench lineup's going to look like, especially if Chris Boucher is going to start off the start of the season and be in that 4 spot. I mean, he's going to be playing next to, most nights, you would think, if they're doing the hockey changes, which they might not, but if they are, Malachi Flynn, Scottie Barnes, Precious Achiuwa, Yuta Watanabe might be in there. Like, he's going to be playing with some young dudes, and I think he's going to be a really good steadying force to have out there in lineups that, without him, could get a little chaotic. And we saw last year those sort of ragtag second units without a lot of sort of direction were at times really fun, but also mostly pretty bad and ran into a lot of trouble. I feel like Dragic kind of being out there to be like the adult in the room in a lot of ways is going to be super valuable. And it seems like he's ready to embrace that, which is lovely. I'm really looking forward to watching him play and seeing what he can do. And, again, November 8th, that's my over under. People are going to be head over heels in love with Goran Dragic by that date. And I'm happy to stamp that. That might be part of our over unders, actually. Let's do like a weekly power poll during the season. Do you like Dragic yet? Yes or no? Either way, that feels like a pretty good place to leave it, unless you had any parting thoughts. Gary Trent Jr. spoke, didn't really say a whole lot. Doesn't really match the on-court demeanor with his on-mic presence. That's totally fine. Not everybody likes doing that stuff. It's cool. But what's your any last thoughts here before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think, the one thing is I like that Fred kind of put it in everyone's ears that the all defense stuff needs a bit of a refresh, and people need to wake up to what certain guys on the Raptors are capable of doing. So I think that's an important part of it. I hope Fred is on them throughout the season and letting people know exactly what he's about on that end of the floor.
Yeah, that should be fun. I mean, all defense voting is always pretty bad, but last year felt especially so because a couple Raptors got totally phased out, even though they played more minutes than Matisse Thybulle. That's fine. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's show. Big V, you're going to be back later in the week on Wednesday. We're going to talk about Fred VanVleet and continue our series of episodes about what a successful season would look like for some key members of the Raptors. Katie Heindl's going to pop on the show later this week as well. We got a loaded week as we are back to daily posting. Still not sure what tomorrow's episode will be just yet, but I might run through some of the mailbag questions I did not get to on the last episode of the show that I did. So you have that to look forward to as well. That'll do it. Big V, where can people check out your work?
Raptors.com. I'll still be doing some work here and there for Complex Canada, CBC Sports. That's where you can check it all out. You can follow me on Twitter at Vivek M. Jacob.
Hell yeah, dude. You can find me at Woodley Sean. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of today. Go make your second listen Locked on NBA. Well, why don't you? They're doing a wonderful job covering all the media's day across the league. And I'm sure there will be plenty of talk about problematic vaccine takes and other things if that is your bag. Or they have other good basketball content to get you through as well. Either way, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you again Tuesday with another episode of Locked on Raptors. Bye-bye.